Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us again this week. Just like always, my name is Jim Reid. I'm going to be your host. I've got a kind of a special message to start off this episode of the podcast. This is a special edition of the podcast. In 2024, we released a series of podcast episodes based specifically around each month's mixed game of the month in our home game club at Rec Poker. And it was a big success. And we've continued to play a lot of those mixed games in our home game club, even in beyond the year 2024. So we thought one thing that would be kind of a neat idea would be as those games come up from month to month in our home game club, we would just re-release some of these mixed games episodes from that series in 2024. So some of you may have heard this episode before, but because the subject of this episode is going to be the game that we're playing next month, we thought we would just kind of send these out as a bonus episode. So if you have heard already, we've tried to add some new tips from guests onto the end of the show. We won't be able to do that for every episode, but I think it might be worth re-listening to. There are some great tips on how to enjoy some of these mixed games every month that you'll hear these. And if not, yeah, dig in. I think, we should all be playing more mixed games. There's a lot more to poker than No Limit Hold'em. So, I guess without further ado, I hope that you jump in, join our home game club. It's free to play, but the prizes are real. And like I say, give some mixed games a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So we're gonna just roll right into that. You'll hear that episode again right now in its entirety. Thanks for sticking with us, and I look forward to chatting with you next week on the Rec Poker Podcast. All right. Well, hello, folks. You know you're in for a treat when you hear that tune. 'Cause it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Reid, Bluff Sterini in the home game and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. And I have the best freaking job in the world talking poker with my friends here on the Strategy Forums edition of the podcast every Monday night while we steal each other's chips in the free nightly home game. I have to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Most of what we do here is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, so we depend on support from our sponsors and also from our premium members who get to take part in our training material and study opportunities for only $15 a month. And just ask yourself, do you like talking poker with your friends? Because for less than 50 cents a day, come connect over Zoom with other fun, encouraging poker players like yourself, all trying to get better, all trying to solve the same problems and to make each other better. And if you want to dip a toe in and see what's up for free, sign up for free because everything starts with a free account at rec.poker where all you need is an email address and a smile. And remember, you can always get your first month of premium for only $5 by using the code RECPOKER at checkout. Now, they let me host the show on Mondays, but I am just the host. I'm just one man. It takes a group of wizards to make all the magic happen here at Rec Poker. We call this group of wizards the Wrecking Crew. And if you want to find out more about me or the rest of the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew. But you're going to meet one crucial component of the Rec Poker Wrecking Crew machine, and that is our home game director, the one and only John Somsky. John, welcome to our audience here. I can't wait to talk some mixed game stuff with you tonight.
Yeah, I am looking forward to it as well. And I am John Somsky, also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere.
Now, John, we're going to be doing a special episode tonight talking specifically about how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw. So our regular listeners will know that every month we're doing a featured mixed game on the second Wednesday of the month as part of our Play Money home game club. So every month on the second Wednesday, you get to compete with other serious, thoughtful recreational players in a series of tournaments towards our mixed player of the year race. So those are going to be on the second Wednesday of every month. And we are releasing a podcast focusing on how to play that mixed game every month, just in time for you to start practicing. So we're releasing this episode in January. The No Limit Deuce to Seven single draw tournament will be on the second Wednesday of February. So it gives you a little time to practice. On the third, fourth, and fifth Wednesdays of every month, we're going to have our mixed practice game, our practice mixed game. which just means that you get to dip a toe in and splash around and see how the game works before that big important tournament on the second Wednesday of every month. And if I've done my math right, this episode should come out on Tuesday, the day before the first practiced mixed game in the month of January. So, John, you've done such a great job putting this whole slate of mixed games together every month of the year. We're going to start this episode talking about no limit, deuce to seven, single draw. Why don't you go over some of the mechanics of the game and how to play it, and then we'll hear from some of our guests with some strategy tips and advice on how players can get the most out of it.
Well, hopefully this will become known as a romantic game. The main reason I am saying that is this game we are going to be playing on February 14th,
Oh,
Valentine's Day.
I
So
like
you'll
that.
have on January 17th, 24th, and 31st, you get 3 shots at practice here. And as I mentioned last time, there are draw games, stud games, and flop games. This is another draw game. So we're going to continue in the draw game. Last month we played no limit 5 card draw. This time we are playing no limit deuce to seven single draw. So instead of being the high hand wins, it's the low hand wins. And when we talk to low ball games, you typically refer to them as ace to five or deuce to seven.
Hmm.
Ace to five means ace to five is the lowest possible hand, and you only care about the ranks of your hands. You don't care about the suits. So an ace through five would be the lowest in that. Here we are talking playing deuce to seven. So not only do the ranks of the cards count, but also the suits. So if you have a deuce to seven that is a all spades, you have a spade flush, which is a very high ranking hand, and therefore not a good deuce to seven hand. Likewise, often you will be drawing to a great hand. You'll have a deuce through five. Throw away your last card, and on the draw, you're going to pick up a six. Well, a six is not a good card for you because now you have a straight, which is also a very high hand. So the best possible hand is 7, 5, 4, 3 deuce with at least 2 suits in it. So you have no flushes, no straights, and 7 high is what you're actually playing. With this, the mechanisms are exactly the same as they were in 5 card draw. Everyone is dealt 5 cards. You have your small blind and big blind. Action starts after the big blind, and they will bet. After your betting round, the people who remain in will decide to draw, and they can draw anywhere from 0 to 5 cards. After everyone has drawn, then you will have one more betting round, and then you have the showdown. So the mechanism is very similar to No Limit Hold'em. The thing that is different between deuce to seven single draw and if you're playing 5 card draw high versus low is you're going to make the best possible hand much more often in deuce to seven single draw. um, there are not very many times that people are end up with a royal flush playing no limit 5 card draw, but it happens. Someone over the course of the night, if not multiple people, will have the best possible hand in deuce to seven single draw. So it gives you a chance to kind of figure out where you're at. In general, any hand that has a 7 high is good. So even if you're sitting on 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 or 7, 6, 5, 4 deuce,
Right.
that's still a very strong hand. Most of your eights are pretty decent as well. Once you get into nines, the good chance that's going to win, but it's not a rock solid hand. It's like having, top pair on a board. It
Hmm.
might win, right? It's a good hand, but it's not a great hand by the time you hit the river. Um, so, but this will get you used to playing low ball. And Just make sure, when you draw, if you have a pair of deuces and you need to throw one of them, make sure you have mixed suits in your hand. Um, in general, you probably don't want to have to draw more than two cards. If you need to draw more than two, unless for some reason you're playing, out of the big blind without having to put more money in, you probably should be folding those hands, generally speaking. So as you're getting used to it, playing a little tight can be good. But the nice thing about this is I've occasionally drawn four and hit the wheel. The wheel
Hmm.
is best possible hand, deuce to seven, and no one expects it. So it can be fun.
I love it. And I guess so one thing I'm hearing from you is that um, the nuts are sort of more available in this one because it's easier to get an unsuited combination from deuce through seven than it is, like you say, to make a royal flush in high hand poker, for instance.
Right.
And I guess when there's only, similar to last month, when there's only two betting rounds, even though it's no limit, that makes me feel like the pots must be smaller than we might be used to in like no limit hold'em, for instance, where you have more betting rounds and bets tend to reflect the size of the pot. So the bigger bets later, the later bets tend to be the bigger bets. Um,
Yes.
is there a limit on like the number of raises that can go back and forth on any given street here?
Only limited to the number of chips you have in front of you.
Okay,
You know,
cool.
so you can keep raising till you get all in. And it's some people, Doyle Brunson called this the most pure form of poker
Hmm.
because it really comes down to, do they have it or don't they? Because it's really, when you're drawing one card, it is really easy to represent the nuts.
Hmm.
Just say I have the best possible hand, and you don't know if they do or not. So it's a good spot for bluffing. It's a good spot for calling people who you think are bluffing. Um, it's just a really interesting game. Is one of the games that Bernard Lee actually says it is his favorite mixed game.
Yep.
And back in 1970, when they were doing the very first World Series of Poker, actually, it was the second one, when they were going to have a tournament to have the championship for it, they had a discussion on whether it was going to be no limit hold'em or deuce to seven single draw. And,
Lovely.
obviously everyone knows it was no limit hold'em, but that lets you know how high in esteem several poker players hold this game.
I believe it. My last question before we go to listen to some of our guests' contributions about how to play this game. In big bet games like this with no limit, um, is there much of an incentive to, if your opponent draws three, let's say, or even two, if you're in position, there's only going to be one more betting round. Is there an Do people stand pat just to represent strength so that they can bet big after the drawing round, or is that less sort of like strategically valuable than just drawing? And I'm sorry, what I mean to say is if you don't have a very good hand, if your opponent's drawing, is it strategically valuable to sort of represent a good hand by not drawing yourself? Because there's only going to be one betting round that you can try and put them off it.
It depends. Often standing pat, people will stand pat with weaker hands than they will draw to. So, like if you're sitting on a nine, a rough nine, like a 9-7 or a 9-8, you don't necessarily want to break it, but that's not that good of a hand. Even
Hmm.
a 10 or a jack, sometimes you might decide to stand on rather than, like, if someone drew three, I would probably stay with a 10 high, maybe even a jack high, because you do not want to pair your hand.
Right.
And if they're drawing three, there's a good chance they will, or they'll get a very high card. Um, so you can play some of those games, but you got to be careful because your opponents know you can do that as well. So it really is about having, if you're going to bluff, having well-timed bluffs against the right opponents at the right times. Uh, in this game, if you are playing live, getting physical tells is invaluable because that's most of the information you're getting. You know how many cards they drew. But if everyone is playing tight and everyone drew one card, you don't really know. I mean, some people will draw to an 8 or draw to a 9 more often,
Hmm.
in which case, if you're drawing to the 7, you know that you're just starting off playing stronger. But it's a it's a tough game. I don't know that, and I do not have it mastered by any stretch of the imagination, but I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Well, I can see why it is a real test of what people think of like the old days of poker being, which is a do they have it or do they don't kind of like, reading the player and playing the player and like only having one draw, one chance to improve your hand. And like you say, if they're the odds of getting a high card or a pairing your hand when you draw multiple cards goes up. I can see why it's so popular or why it's held in such high esteem. Let's hear from some guests that have been on the show over the last little while who had some thoughts to lend, and we'll get back to our free play money home game club and start practicing together on some Wednesday nights leading up. Thanks, John, and we'll talk about this again soon. All right, Bernard Lee, give me a tip or some advice on how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw.
So thanks for having me on, and let's take a little bit of a step back and just kind of give you a little bit maybe of some history too. So deuce to seven low ball or deuce to seven single draw was actually sometimes referred to as a Kansas City low ball. That's kind of the way it was previously. And also, some people may not know this, but originally before the World Series main event was officially stated that it would be a no limit holdem tournament, this was actually one of the games that was considered as possibly the game that would have been the main event. I want everyone to put that in perspective. That's what this game is, how much meaning this game has. This game really is, in a lot of respects, the truest form of poker. You can look at it in different ways. I kind of look at it as there is a pre-flop or pre-draw, and then you're right to the river. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no flop. Let's see the turn. Let's see let's see how. Let's flow to that kind of. It's not that way. It is really, are you going to play it? And if you are, did you get it? And that's it. That's what single draw is all about. This isn't, I'll try one. Oh, well, some players will be like, oh, when we get to triple draw, well, I'll toss away 3 because I have 2 good cards and let's see what the odds are. You got one draw, right? You got one draw. Drawing to more than one, not so good. And so did you get it or did you not? And it's a really kind of interesting game. There's a lot of polarizing bets, small bets, massive bets. 2.5x bets of the pot is not something that's so outrageous because you really have very little time to make money in this game. You've got, like I said, pre-draw and then basically the final bet. So I think you guys have talked about the rules, but just basically it is aces high. So straights and flush count against you. So therefore, if you start with the lowest card, which is a deuce, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 doesn't count because it's a straight. So therefore, it's a 7. Okay, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Ergo the name deuce to 7. Okay, so that's why this game is the way it is. When we're talking about single draw is different than triple draw. And I'm going to give you a little bit of reference. When you guys have talked about 7 card stud, high, low, ace is king. Ace is absolutely king because it can go both ways. It can really swing that way. It can be a high card, it can be a low card. When you're playing low ball right? When you're playing a triple, when you're playing deuce to seven, it's a scoop pot, right? There's no splitting, so it's one way. And as important as an ace is, that's how important a deuce is. To put this into perspective, you can only make four sevens. You must have a deuce to make a seven. Okay, it's absolutely critical that you understand that, because you cannot have 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. It's a straight. So there's only 4 sevens. So in triple draw, deuce is absolutely paramount if you want to get one of the monster hands. However, in single draw, that's not necessarily the case. You don't necessarily have to have a deuce, because having an 8 is still a monster hand in single draw. 9s are still good in single draw. So let's put this into perspective. There are 4 combinations of sevens. There are 14 combinations of 8s, and there are 34 combinations of 9s. Okay, so you can see it. To get a 7 or an 8, there are only 18 combinations. There are 34 combinations of 9s. So that's how incredible a 7 or an 8 is in single draw. So that's why getting those hands are massive. In triple draw, you almost have to have a 7 or an 8. You don't have, it's not, there are definitely situations accordingly, especially on your second draw, one person draws one person, that kind of stuff. But in general, you're going to have a great hand. 87s aren't usually good in triple draw. They often are bad, especially multi-way, etc. So you're really you're really looking to get this best hand. In single draw, you don't necessarily have to have a 7 or an 8. In all honesty, you rarely see 7 or 8s because you're only drawing it once. So it's not that incredible to, have to have a 7 or an 8. You can have a 9, a 10, even a jack, and, you've seen it even worse with regards to that. So don't necessarily think that, I have to have a 7 or an 8 in single draw to make it. So again, we talked about this is a 5-card draw game. Everyone gets 5 cards. It is a blind game. The biggest thing that you want to have advice-wise is with regards to drawing, okay, is you really don't want to draw more than 1 card. You don't want to be drawing 2 cards. Some people will look down and say, like, but I have 7-4 deuce or 7-3 deuce, which is the best 3 starting cards. Well, why not? And some people may say, why wouldn't deuce 3-4? It is a close second, but because deuce 3-4 could potentially make a straight, that's why 2-3-7 is more powerful, right? If you look at that 2-3-7, there are no 2 cards that can slide in there that can give you that straight. It is physically impossible. Therefore, if you're a holdem person, you'll understand deuce 7 is the worst hand possible. We're playing the worst hand. We're playing the worst game. So therefore, we're playing low ball. So that's why deuce to 7 is great, right? It's the absolute opposite of what you're thinking about. So that's what you have to think about with regards to single draw games, okay? So you don't really want to draw more than 1 card. You'd rather draw 2 cards. You'd rather draw 1 card. You don't want to draw 2 cards. That's not good because it's just making it harder for you to get that hand that will hold up. However, there is something else that's very important, is position. People talk about no limit hold'em and how important position is. You can multiply that by an exponential factor and how important it is with regards to deuce to 7. I'm going to tell you why. I relate it very similarly to blackjack. When you play blackjack and you are playing against a house, The house gets to see what you do first. You have to act first. And so the house sits there and it's like, okay, well, you busted. Doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about it. I'm going to win. So you have to act first. Because of that factor, position is everything. So therefore, if you are in earlier position, you want to have a much stronger hand. We talk about it in No Limit Hold'em where, oh, we want to have aces or whatever it is, but you want to have an incredibly strong hand if you are playing deuce to seven early position. I can't emphasize that enough, because the longer the later you have, the more opportunity that you will have position on people, and therefore if you have position, you get to see what they are going to do first. Now, some people are like, so what does that matter? It matters it matters a lot, because to get that to have that position, you now are able to watch what that person will do. Now, let me explain why that's important, is because there are certain kind of stats. If you are dealt a jack or have a jack, and when I say jack, I mean jack low, and the other person is drawing one card, it is the equivalent of ace king versus a pair in hold'em. Okay, so it's about a 50-50. So a lot of times people will hold a jack if someone draws a card. Of course, if you have a 10, you definitely hold it, 9, 8, etc. Right? You would never throw away an 8. That's obvious. A 10 is possible that you could throw it away. 9, marginal, but it depends on if they don't throw it away. Maybe you will throw it away based off of the betting, etc. So that is why it's so critical and so crucial for you to understand how they are going to act before you. So if they are they are out of position, they take a card, and you have a 10, well, then you're going to hold that hand. That's why position is key. If it's the other way around and you have that 10, you're not sure what you're going to do. Do you throw it away? Do you keep it? That person might have a jack, and guess what? Now they're going to hold. So it's very important for you to be in position. So based off of that, this is another rule that's a good rule of thumb, is if you are out of position, you should have a better hand and a smoother hand. And now, what does a smoother hand and a rougher hand mean? A smoother hand means that you are on the good end of the hand. In other words, you would have 10, 7, 4, 3 deuce. So that's a very smooth hand, because if you threw away the 10, you're drawing to a 7. A rough hand is a scenario where the player has the bad end of the hand. And so what that would mean is, if you had a rough 10, you would have 10, 9, 8, 4 deuce. So if you threw away the 10, at best you're drawing to a 9-8. And by the way, you could be drawing dead to a 9-8. And so the difference of a rough and a smooth hand is massive. Massive. It's not just the top card, it is your other cards too. And if you think about it and relate it to hold'em, it's like your kicker, right? How good is your kicker? And you want a bad kicker. You want 10-7 draw. You don't want 10-9 draw, right? That's how it is, right? So if I had Jack 7, 4, 3 deuce, in some respects, that might even be better than 10-9, 8-7, 5, right? Because you look at that, think about that hand, 10, 9, 8, 7, 5. You throw away the 10, you have a 9, 8, 7, 5. Now you can't even get a 6 because now you're going to drawing a straight. Whereas if a jack throws away a jack, you're drawing to a 7, smooth, 7, perfect. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 is called the wheel. Okay, I know a lot of people think of it as ace 2, 3, 4, 5. They call 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 the wheel, or they call it number 1. Okay, so those are very important things for you to understand in single draw. Position is key. If someone's drawing 1 and you have a jack, it's a 50-50. If they're drawing 2 and you have a queen, it's 50-50. So those are things to kind of think about. And remember, it is definitely a situation where you want to be in position. You don't want to be drawing more than 1 card. And there is bluffing. So don't think that there isn't bluffing in this game. And you really have to take that, chance in some respects to be like, let's say they drew 1 and you drew 1. Okay, well, they checked. You're going to bet or not, right? You could have a pair of 7s. Are you going to bet or not? See what happens, right? So a lot of times some people might make bluff bets if they pair one of their low cards, right? So if you pair anything from a deuce to a 7, well, guess what? That eliminates them from potentially having that card. It's a blocker, right? So, if you think about it in holdem, well, I have an ace king, so there's a blocker. So if you had it, you got pair of 5s. Okay, well, the odds are they didn't get their card. Now they could have gotten a queen and try to call you on it, but just as in reference, that's one of the thought processes. Now we're going to get into real deep thoughts of deuce to 7 single draw, no limit, but that's it. So hopefully that really gives you guys a sense of what deuce to 7 no limit is. It is absolutely my favorite game. I don't like missing it ever. I've been fortunate to final table the deuce to 7 1500 twice. Unfortunately, I will remember it until I do win a bracelet that I finished runner-up a few years ago. A 4-hour heads up, so it was really painful. And I did final table a deuce to 7 10K as well. So those are my 3 final tables in deuce to 7 single draw, and absolutely love the game. I've written columns on it on ESPN for Card Player. I've done multiple interviews. I hope I'm somewhat of an ambassador to the game. I have talked with Billy Baxter, who is obviously the king of lowball, interviewed him, talked to him about it, and enjoyed this game and really enjoy the game. So hopefully all of you will enjoy this game and really find a love for this game, because I'm hoping that the game will continue. I've even presented it to Jack Effel to have a scenario where it would be half no limit hold'em, half deuce to 7 single draw. Play it 6-man or 7-man, and you could go back and forth levels. Jack took that to another scenario where he made it a big bet game where he added pot limit Omaha. But I think that doesn't get in the people who just play no limit hold'em, because it'll scare the people who don't play pot limit Omaha. So I would love to have that game alone, because I think you would really expand the game. I think you could really expand the game by at least 25%, just because people are like, oh, this is kind of cool. Everyone who plays it, really gets into it and really likes it. And, like I said, it's a fantastic game and I enjoy it.
All right, Chad McVean, give me a tip on how to play no limit deuce to 7 single draw.
Well, you know how you're always supposed to get good hands and always end up with bad hands? This is where you want that to happen. You only have 1 draw. So what I find in this game is you really need to know your opponent. If they're drawing 1, 2, or 3, you need to know what are the chances they're actually going to make something good, because as it is no limit, you can definitely bluff your way through a few hands here.
All right, Chris Fox Wallace, give me a tip on how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw.
A couple tips. twodimes.net/poker is a single draw equity calculator. And it's important to remember hand distributions in single draw. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand in terms of advanced strategy. The number of possible sevens you can make is 4. The number of possible 8s you can make is 14. And the number of 9s you can make is 34. And the number of 10s is 69. So as you get these bigger and bigger hand distributions, but the majority of the 10s that you make will be 10 9s and 10 8s. You don't make a good 10 very often. So the difference between a 10-6 and a 10-9 doesn't feel like that much, when in fact it's really big. You're actually cutting off, when you go from the best 10 to the worst 10, you've eliminated more than half of your whole range from 10s to 7s. More than, if your range is a 10-9 or better, more than half of that is 10s. So, when you're thinking about calling a bluff, or you're thinking about drawing to a hand, just remember that, drawing to a 10-9 isn't great, and drawing to a 10-6 can be. Those kinds of things are important to remember, and to know some of those numbers.
All right, Mike Patrick, give me some tips on how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw.
Okay, so the one steadfast rule that everybody that plays this game should know is that pre-draw, any pat jack is stronger than a one-card draw. You can be drawing 2, 3, 4, 5. You can be drawing 2, 3, 4, 7. You can be drawing any super low draw. But if you have Jack 10, 9, 8, 6, that is still a favorite over any one-card draw. So anytime you have a Pat Jack, it is a favorite over any one-card draw out there, no matter what they're drawing to. So generally, especially if you're in position, or actually out of position, really, for that matter, if you think your opponent's going to be drawing to 1, you want to be getting aggressive and playing your pat hands as such, and knowing that your hand is going to be a favorite over any draw.
All right, Norman Chad, give us some advice on how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw.
No limit deuce to seven single draw, arguably the toughest poker game around. When they were deciding what was going to be the World Championship back at the original World Series, it was going to be either no limit hold'em or this game. And this game is tougher. You have no information. It is all instinct. It is all guts. It's all your feel for the other player. You have no information in front of you. You don't have a board. So it's really a hard game to play. It is the purest gambling game. And for amateurs, it's the one I tell people to stay away from the most, because it is the hardest. I can give you no advice. I've never won a no limit deuce to seven low ball draw hand ever.
Okay, Rob Washam, give me a tip on how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw.
Well, actually, this is not one of my better games. But there are a few things that I see mistakes that other people make. A lot of people think that the ace is low. I've seen people show down hands where they have an ace and they think they're going to win. And no, ace is always high. It's never low in this game. Deuce is the lowest card. So that's the first tip. Keep in mind that aces are not low, because a lot of your low games, GLO 8 and stud 8, they always have eights as a low card. Well, that mentality won't work very well in deuce to seven. The other thing is, never, if it's single draw, you never want to draw more than 2 cards. If your hand is not good enough to draw 1 or 2 cards, just throw it away pre-flop. It's not worth it. The odds are not with you. You better have 3 cards, 7 or lower, and definitely you want a deuce or a 3 in that hand. If you have a deuce and or a 3, and you have 3 cards, 7 or lower, you can draw 2. Now, if you have, let's say you have a deuce, a 4, a 7, and an 8. Well, that's not a bad draw for 1 card. An 8 or a 9, even a 10 sometimes, a 10 high can actually win you the pot in single draw. So keep that in mind. That's all I got.
Nice. Robbie Straczynski, give me some advice on how to play no limit deuce to seven single draw.
So here's a good tip. A pat jack is better than drawing one. So if you're facing one opponent and you've got a pat jack and they're drawing one, you're actually a favorite to win. So hold on to that jack, don't draw.
All right. Well, that was another fun conversation about mixed games. My thanks to, of course, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for their support over the years. To John Somsky and the other members of our Wrecking Crew panel here talking about their love of mixed games, and all our fantastic guests who contributed their segments, their thoughts and tips and advice on how to get the most out of some different mixed games that we're going to be playing. So I'd encourage you, head on over to rec.poker, sign up for a free account there. You can go to rec.poker/home game and find out all about the different mixed games that are being played throughout the year, a different one every month. And I would encourage our listeners, if you're a no limit hold'em player, dip a toe into some of the mixed games. You'll be surprised how much fun you can have. So without further ado, I'll just say thanks for joining us for another week of the Rec Poker podcast. And I hope I get to see you all again next week or sometime real soon. Good luck on the felt, folks. Thanks again. Bye for now.